And we are on the air for our fourth episode, I believe.
Hey Nathan, how's it going?
Good, man. To the,
Good.
I started calling it the Jason Fried and Nathan Cotney want to do a podcast, but don't have another name show.
Yeah, it's good. It's
I
funny,
kind of
we're
like
actually
it.
in the same office but in different rooms because it's kind of hard around a webcam to have two people. You kind of you can't shove each other, like you're trying to get in the frame. It's kind of weird. So we're just in different places, although we're in the same office. So we're like 10 feet away
Pretend we don't
talking.
know each other.
Yeah. So, all right, let's get into it this time. We're down. Before it was 5 minutes before we got into it. Now we're down to 1 minute before we get into it.
All right.
Let's get into it.
Okay.
What's going on at Highrise?
Well, one of the current challenges we have is it's like even it's going on like today actively is like almost something it's a multidimensional. It's I can't point my finger on exactly like one issue, but it's like but it also it really has a lot to do with like tool paralysis, I think. Like what the best tool for the job is, because I mean right now we're trying to do we're trying to get better at planning. We're trying to get better at doing some process at Highrise. You know, what goes out, make sure everybody is on the same page. You know, my initial inclination is always really just throw the stuff into like a Highrise case, because you know the tool's always open all day for me. I'm constantly checking it, so it's like I've got a really rudimentary thing I could just shove notes and things into, and even make some tasks. And it's not exactly built for project management, but you could force it, you could make it happen. But we've been exploring some other stuff like Trello and, you know, obviously Scrum boards. I mean, that's kind of a popular thing these days. You know, we have our chat room, which a lot of stuff and conversation flying around. And then we have GitHub, and there's things like GitHub issues, and there's conversations about pull requests there. You know, and then there's even just there's Basecamp. There's the next version of Basecamp. So it becomes difficult, and people have their own opinions and needs and desires of how they want to converse and discuss about these things. But then we start blocking on the conversations about what tool to use. Where do we put this conversation? We can't find it. It's weird, and I don't know how to quite just.
So people are like commenting on pull requests at GitHub, for example, and then they're talking about something in a chat room, and then if you have Trello, there's a Trello board, and there's like some comments going on there, and it's like stuff sort of all over the place.
Yeah, and I agree. You know, like Trello is this nice visual way of kind of planning what we want to do. Lynette just made it a really kind of nice Trello board of a train schedule, like you and I have talked about in previous episodes. You know, like, hey, here's what I want to get done in the next release. 3 weeks later, here's what I want to get done.
Yep.
It's really nice to kind of lay that out. But then like the details of what those things are, where does that get spelled out? In the Trello, or does it get spelled out in a GitHub where all the development's happening?
Yeah.
And you know, like we'll you know, inevitably there will be a pull request, and then we'll be like, oh, this pull request, there's a weird oddity here in the design. We need to change that. But like that's something then that like diverges from that conversation in Trello or wherever the hell we originally decided to create the feature. So then you have no like one unique view of like what the hell's going on. And it's frustrating. I can see where people are getting frustrated, but it's also this weird, we're all debating like what tool we should be using to like get shit done.
There's sort of an interesting thing going on out there, which is people are using 4, 5, 6 different tools, and then trying to spit all the output into single tool or 2 tools. But there's a lot of we see this. We do customer interviews, and we see like we talk to people who are using Basecamp, project managers using Basecamp. They're like, well, our dev team uses Pivotal Tracker. And she's like, but I would never show the client Pivotal Tracker. Like, Pivotal Tracker is not for the client, or not even for half the stakeholders. It's like, it's complicated, and it's like developers love that stuff. Fine, whatever. Like, that's the developer's domain is Pivotal Tracker. And she's like, but whenever we need to keep a client updated, we post it to Basecamp because it goes out as an email, and it's just very straightforward. And like, but now we've got some, the developers are working over here, and I'm working over here, and like, if I want to assign someone some work, and it's like, but it's a developer, do I assign it to them in Basecamp or do I go into Pivotal Tracker, which just like freaks me out? I keep hearing like freaks me out a lot when I talk to people about Pivotal Tracker, but developers love it because it's very focused on their work, but it's not great for someone on the outside of that world to come in and work with it. And by the way, that's not to suggest it's a bad product. Actually, it's quite great for developers working on tasks quickly and the whole thing like that. That's really solid. It's just like when you have different people from different groups, and this is one of the challenges of projects, is you have people at different levels, at different groups with different needs, in different departments across an organization. And some people like to talk this way and some people like to talk that way. It's like a really interesting challenge. You guys are relatively small, so you're lucky you're there. But I hear this like proliferation of tools thing going on. So it's something I don't have an answer, by the way. Like I'm like, use this or use that, but like I feel that thing.
Yeah.
I hear about it and I feel it. I mean, in some ways, this is sort of one of the sweet spots of Basecamp, and I kind of don't want to use these half hours as product placement.
Right.
But like one of the things about Basecamp is it's a variety of like simple tools in a single package is sort of the pitch kind of in some ways. So we've sort of built it around that. But we still also use GitHub and we use other tools as well. And we use Hangouts like we're doing now. We use Skype sometimes. We use a bunch of other tools for different jobs. And I kind of feel like in some ways that's just the way things are. But as far as getting a big picture overview and like what's the canonical place, that's sort of a important thing to figure out.
I mean, what do you guys do? So if you have let's say you're chewing on a design problem, you come up with a concept you want. You want, I don't know, let's say to-do lists, and you come up with this new idea for the to-do list or whatever, and then you kick it off to a developer, give it to Javon, and Javon works on it or something, and he creates a pull request, and I don't know, someone else looks at it, or you look at it, or another designer looks at it, and they're like, this isn't good, or this isn't, something is screwed up with this, or like this was a good idea, but we should maybe go in a different direction. Do you have that conversation in the pull request? I mean, it's a natural place to like talk about like the thing that's about to get merged into your code or deployed.
Yeah.
Or do you have a rule like get those conversations out of there because we'll just like diverge from where we started it in Basecamp or something? Or what do you do?
A little bit of both. I mean,
fair.
I was looking at a pull request yesterday, and there was some commentary in GitHub which I hadn't seen because I'm not in GitHub looking at that stuff most of the time. Oftentimes, what we'll do is we'll post something into Basecamp. There'll be a comment thread going on, if there's a pull request, they'll just like say in the comments like submitted a pull request or whatever, and there'll be we'll just include a link to it. And then typically conversation will hopefully, it's kind of depends. It's like it really depends. If the conversation is purely technical, for example, when there's only a couple people that need to be part of that conversation, they might just have it in GitHub where the code lives. But if it's more of a general thing like product direction or user experience kind of thing, it tends to come back into Basecamp because more people have eyes on it that way.
Right.
But that's just the way we work. It's not that it's a better way. It's just the way we work in part, So I don't know. I don't really know. It's a good. I know a lot of teams struggle with this sort of thing. And then what happens is someone imposes tools, and that's when people start going around the system because they don't like the tools, and it's very hard. It's easy to try to force people to do things a certain way, but it's really hard to get the outcome. People will tend to just follow the path of least resistance for them, whatever that might be, and they're going to go around something if it's really complicated and difficult to use. So even if you have a system, people will go around it. So I don't know. I don't know if it's anything to really worry about too much unless you really feel like you're stuck in the mud half the time because of it.
We'll see. I mean, we have a big, it's not even a big problem, but like we have new people on board. There's like 3 new people started like last week or 2 weeks ago.
What's the system? What do they do? Right.
Right. And so we're also in this phase of like figuring out how to make our little team that just basically doubled in size practically overnight kind of work again in communication. And I think, I mean, we're circling around solutions. I think obviously, I think the answer is really just like patience. Like try to make an improvement. If it doesn't work, keep going. Keep trying some other stuff. Let's not
that is a good
burn
point,
everything
though,
down.
that there's when your culture is forming right now. I mean, you have one, but it's early. It's forming, and your team's doubling in size. You know, I know it's 3 people, but it's still doubling in size.
Yeah.
So you kind of feel like, what do I tell these new people? If we're sort of scattered all over the place, how do I begin to create some sort of predictability around what the new people especially should be doing? Like, because they're going to feel like, hey, I'm new here. Am I doing this wrong? Am I putting stuff in the wrong place? Like, there's anxiety around that for them. So that's, I guess, where those sort of guidelines are handy. But
totally. I mean, like, especially, like, I remember starting with the Obama campaign. It was a pretty easy onboarding process. Like, you're just kind of thrown into the fire. Here's your laptop. Here's the code base. Go. All of our stuff was in Pivotal Tracker. We have this monthly or weekly meeting, blah, 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 blah. I mean, this stuff has been followed for months already. But here it's like, you know, we don't have this thing going on. We doubled in size, which is a significant change to the number of conversations and things going on. So it's just like, what's the process? And it's like, well, whatever we were doing, a month ago, it's probably not going to work today. So I don't know what the fuck we're doing. Let's figure it out.
So why aren't you doing it the way you did it at Obama? Like, what was that not? Did that not work, or did it actually work? Why is there this hesitation to do it the same way again?
At the Obama campaign, I felt it was a little heavy. It was that typical Scrum. I believe it's your typical kind of Scrum workflow. You know, like,
right.
Monday mornings was sprint planning, and then, you know, every day there was that stand-up meeting. That everybody had to kind of give their progress. And then Friday was that retrospective. And, like, there's a number of problems I don't like. I'm not a huge fan of the stand-up meetings. Number one, that stand-up meetings remotely are just kind of icky. We've talked about that.
Yeah.
Like, I'm not in love with getting 8 people on a video conference. So, you know, we've been using recurring questions, which is a feature in the next Basecamp to, like, accomplish this.
Yep.
And it's been working great. I love getting, you know, everybody gets an email every day asking them what they've done. On Monday, they get a question of what they plan on doing for the week. So I feel like this has been kind of replacing that morning meeting of sprint planning a little bit, as well as the daily stand-ups or whatever. But we still have, you know, that the release planning is still kind of a fuzzy place that I don't even know. You know, there was a separate meeting that I wasn't even taking part of at the Obama campaign. It was doing a lot more of that. So yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, it's a real problem though. I hear it and I know about it, and it's tricky. It's a tricky one sometimes, but I think it'll just eventually form. What ends up working, and maybe Lynette will basically say, "Hey, I'm the COO here. I need this thing needs to be tightened up, and here's what we're going to be doing." And so maybe that's what'll end up happening.
Maybe.
Yeah.
So, you know, moving on a little bit, you had brought up Basecamp projects and this thing you're struggling with, kind of naming projects. Mm-hmm. Do you want to talk about that at all anymore? I mean,
sure. Yeah, this is still kind of a thing that's on my mind, and will be on my mind probably until the day we launch the product, which is, what do we call these things that you make in Basecamp?
Yeah.
We've always called them projects ever since February 5th, 2014, which, funny enough, by the way, that's when Basecamp launched, 2004, sorry. February 5th, 2004, same exact day Facebook launched, which is wild. Yeah, I didn't realize that until like a few years ago when they were celebrating their 10th anniversary or whatever it was. And I'm like, wait, that's our 10th anniversary. And like, oh my God, we both launched on the same day. How about that? So that was
wild. I had no idea.
Yeah. Anyway, there's always been projects. And it's funny is when I look at our usage of Basecamp, we kind of have a few projects going and then a bunch of other things that aren't technically projects. And so it's like, what do we optimize around? What do we optimize for? My current feeling is that we're limiting ourselves by using a label that is very specific, that even though it's specific, a lot of people still aren't sure what a project is. It's very interesting. When we did a bunch of customer interviews, people weren't sure what a project was, which was interesting because in their mind, they actually were pretty clear about it. Like, they got a gig from a client and like that was a project, but they still like had a hard time understanding what a project in Basecamp was, which just was kind of surprising to me. It was kind of one of those moments where you're like, wow, we've been assuming things for quite a while. Anyway, so I don't know. The thing I'm tossing around is, so Product's called Basecamp. Early, actually, so we had this thought, or we originally started calling them projects in this new version. And then we said, let's try something else. We started calling them Basecamps because a lot of customers that we hear from when we talk to them, they're like, yeah, I set up a Basecamp for that. I'm like, wait a second. You set up a separate account? Because that's like what's in my mind. And they're like, no, we set up a Basecamp for it. I'm like, wait, just so I can understand, you set up a separate account for each client or something? Like, no. We just set up separate Basecamps. And I'm like, wait. And so like, it's one of these things where they were using a term, and in my mind, Basecamp is the product. And so, but for them, projects were Basecamps. They're like, they thinking about like, I'll set up a Basecamp for this client as Basecamp, even though it's all in the same thing. Anyway, so it started getting us thinking, maybe these things are just Basecamps. Set up a Basecamp. And so we ran with that for a few months. And it just became difficult to explain. It's like, well, set up then you get into accounts. It's like, well, I have 3 Basecamp accounts and there's Basecamps in my Basecamp. And it's like, whoa, just lost it, right? Yeah. Like GitHub's a good example. Like if repos were called GitHubs, it's like would blow up. It wouldn't work. So like repos sort of are the things that live inside GitHub. That's kind of clear. But if they're called GitHubs also, it'd be like weird. Even though some people like check out my GitHub, which is like, anyway. We tried that for a while. That didn't work. So we switched back to projects again, because you always fall back to what's familiar to you and what feels comfortable. Even if it's not necessarily maybe the best thing, and maybe it is, I don't know. But like, so the thing that I'm tossing around in my head is the idea of calling Basecamp projects campsites. So you get your Basecamp and you can set up campsites. And you might set up a campsite for a project. You might set up a campsite for a team. You might set up a campsite for a client and keep all your client projects for that particular client in that one client's campsite. You might set up a campsite just for your company. And the idea, or like you might set up a campsite for 3 people who are just working together on something, and they're maybe jumping between projects, and it's not even about projects. It's just about like work. And so like Basecamp has campsites, and inside campsites you can set, you can use a campsite for a project or for an event or for a team or for a group of people or for an individual or whatever it might be. So that's something that's sort of tossing around in my head a little bit, which I kind of really like, but I don't know if it's right, but it sort of feels like it could work really well. And it's kind of, it's along the same theme, right? You got a Basecamp and campsites and that whole thing. So I also like the word site. But I don't like the word just site, because site is typically like a public thing, like a website, and these aren't public, they're private. So, but I like the word site because it's like it's a place, it's a location, it's a space. There's something about that. It's also like, it's something you can point at and point to, and it's a place you can go and that kind of stuff, which I like that side of it too. So, and that's something I'm tossing around. So by the way, it's funny, like I'm talking about this out loud, but I want to pitch this again, and I remember pitching it earlier, and David and I disagreed about it. We disagree about a variety of things. I may have talked about this before. Like we have very similar values, and then we disagree on about maybe like 10% of the implementation around something, right? And so this is one of those things that he didn't love the word at the time. I get that. Like there's a word, whatever. It's a label. It's a word. But I kind of feel good about it. It's like I kind of want to pitch it again, but I'm also sort of hesitating doing it again. So it's kind of one of those things where, is there another word I can come up with that wouldn't have the baggage, since there's already one? Like I don't love that. Like, is there something else? And it's this real conflict you have with yourself, which is, do I really pitch it the same thing again? Do I pitch a variety of something? Do I not speak up because I'm not sure how it's going to be received? Like, that goes on in my head all the time. So anyway, it's just speaking out loud about these kind of things.
No, it's very interesting. So some stuff, when you brought this up a couple days ago, some stuff that started going on in my mind. Again, this isn't like, this is how I think you should change it. But it did make me think and start asking a couple more questions about it, which was, so in Highrise, we have like, in Highrise, we have this problem where, it's different, but it reminded me of trying to do a little too much with one thing. So like we have this activity stream in Highrise, right? The latest activity, and in the parlance of the jobs to be done stuff. I mean, there's jobs that people have when using that. They want to either find out what their team is, what clients a team is communicating with. Is their team communicating with some of their higher profile clients? But then there's another job that people have, and what we have very frequently is like, did we get back to that person? Did someone email us, and did we get back to them? And so right now we've added a little field at the bottom of the little email, or of an email that comes in that says like, oh, Chris replied to this, which lets me know like no one else has, I don't have to deal with it. I don't have to look at it because someone did it. But like, now it feels like maybe that recording has become a little cluttered. And Ren Lanier, a designer at Highrise, is really good at pointing out, maybe we're doing too much with this email, and too many jobs at one time in this thing. And so she's a big fan of bringing this somewhere else. And so I've been thinking along the lines of, yeah, maybe it should be a completely separate view that does an inbox approach to Highrise that tells me exactly the stuff that hasn't been replied to, versus trying to shove it into the activity stream where people were had a very different job to do. So I don't know. Thinking about that, it made me think like, I keep hearing from you talk about projects being projects and teams. I mean, that seems to be the two most popular uses or terms that if you're not making a project, it seems like people are making a team.
Yeah.
Is a project doing too much? I mean, should there be teams in Basecamp? Like, should you split them out so that you don't have to worry about renaming projects? They stay projects, but now you have teams. So say that the ops team who wants to create a space for them to talk would create a team instead of a project. Is that a debate you guys have had? Is that go anywhere?
Yeah, actually that's been brought up before, which is like, well, maybe when you hit new, it's like, well, what do you want to create? It's like, do you want to create a team? Do you want to create a project? Do you want to create a company? I don't know. Like, I don't even know, right?
Right.
So that has come up, and it's an interesting line of thought. My initial reaction is, there's a rabbit hole there, which is, you can create a project, you can create a team, you can create an event. If a team's running an event, what's the difference between a team and an event?
Right.
You start to get to this like, well, the event's a project. Like, what do I make now? Do I make a project or do I make an event? And is there actually any functional difference between any of these things? And the answer would be no. There is no functional difference. It's just a matter of labeling. Technically, there could be functional difference at some point, right? But right now there isn't for V1. Like, the product is the product. So it's like, in some ways, getting more specific can lead you down the road of like, actually, paradox of choice, and like, am I making the wrong choice? And what do I lose if I pick this versus that? So coming up with something more generic to me is interesting. And I think about like any sort of container. Like, a container can just hold whatever you put in it. A box can hold whatever you put in it. A folder can hold whatever you put in it. You can put paper in a folder, or you can put pictures in a folder, or you can put paper clips in a folder, or pens, or whatever. Like, a folder is a thing that holds stuff. And no matter what's in the folder doesn't change. It's still called a folder. But you don't feel like you're using the folder the wrong way if you put paper clips in there versus if you put paper in there. You just know that it's a container. It holds something. And if you were to have to select, like, I need a paper clip holder, or I need a paper holder, or I need a photograph holder, you'd be like, well, I don't know. What if I want to put papers and photographs in here? And like, which one do I pick? So I feel like there's a penalty for getting so specific there if the functionality is the same.
Right. Sure.
So I'm trying to come up with something a little bit more about a container. Like, I don't like these words because they're too generic, like space or folder or board or whatever. Like, it's too generic for me. I think I've always been a fan of giving things slightly snappier names that people can talk about. And when they're saying this word, they mean your product, versus like a folder or a workspace. Like, a workspace could be one of dozens of different products, or a room. It's like, I don't know, I can name offhand like probably 8 products that have rooms or something, Sure. But like, who has a campsite or whatever, right? I'm just throwing that in there as like a placeholder, even though I still like it, but yeah, whatever. Like,
I was brainstorming.
No one else has that,
trying to brainstorm a little bit on the camping themes, because I mean, obviously it would be really nice if it led into the camping themes. Like, I was reading about like Basecamp and like trips to Nepal and stuff. It was interesting. I I don't know. I don't have any good ones. There were some interesting names and words that came out, but I'm not quite sure they solve your problem. But like, I don't know. You know,
Yeah,
like
we've
they
like
talk,
looked at all those like Sherpa and like all these things,
yep.
and it's like getting a little cute at that point, which was actually David's argument around campsite. He felt like it was a
Yeah.
little bit cute. I don't think that's particularly cute, but I can understand like that. I can understand that angle on it. So anyway, I'm just sort of trying to figure out like what's something that if you created it, you wouldn't wonder if you're doing it right because you don't think about it
Sure.
anymore. It's not like when you make a choice between 3 or 4 things, if you make a choice, if you pick one, let's say there's 5 options, a team, a group, a company, a project, whatever. You pick one, you're leaving 4 behind. And when you leave 4 things behind and you pick one, it's like, man, I could have gotten it wrong 4 times. Like, what am I doing? Versus like you just create something that's more of a container or whatever of some sort. And, anything can go in that and it just makes sense. And you can still use language like projects and you can still use language like teams, like set up a campsite for your team, set up a campsite for your project, set up a campsite for a client, set up a campsite for an intranet, set up like you can kind of have that. Like, I don't think people stumble over using Trello for projects sometimes or for events because it's like you make a board. And I think board's too generic for me, but like it's a great word for them, especially because like visually that's how it looks. But the point is like, people aren't saying, well, I can't make projects in Trello because there's nothing called a project.
Yeah. What about repurposing backpack as the name since, backpack,
Yeah, we thought about
satchel.
Yeah, we thought about satchel at some point. It's a little too like it. Then it's like that's almost too. If you think about a satchel, that's something that goes on your back. That's for one person. What I like about something like a campsite is it's a place. It's a location for people, to like gather. A site has that to it. It's not a small thing. It's like it's a family thing. It's a collection. It's a place. That sort of thing. We also thought about campfires, right? So we have a product called Campfire, which we don't have anymore. So like maybe you could create campfires. Campfires are great because you like huddle around a campfire and you tell stories and you work together and you work things out. So that's kind of an interesting angle. There's just some baggage around that over the years of just people being used to a product called Campfire for 7 years. So there's that, and I don't know, but it's kind of a neat thing I'm still working on, and certainly we'll be talking about again in the company probably next week when I have some more thoughts developed for it.
Tent villages comes up a lot when talking about a base camp.
Yeah, but like that's not like village tent. You know what I mean? It just has like
I know. It's tricky. I don't think they're all they're perfect or fitting either.
Yeah, so it's fun. I mean, naming is such a blast. I love doing it. It's so fun. I'm trying to find that right name. So
this isn't going to solve one either, but it was a fascinating word to stumble upon when I was looking at this stuff. Expedition. It's a journey with an objective or a journey with a destination.
Yeah.
It's an interesting replacement to the word project because like projects are kind of like journeys with destinations or journeys with objectives. It doesn't solve your team problem or your container problem, but it was an interesting word.
Yeah, I think that is cool. Things that come to mind, and I'm just riffing off the top of my head there, is an expedition it doesn't have a home. And one of the things about a Basecamp is the name, first of all, which is like the name of the product, is that Basecamp is like people go off and do their climbing and they come back to Basecamp or they're going to the next Basecamp. Basecamp is a place where people gather and breathe and talk. And like that's what I also like about campsite or something that's more of a physical location, this feeling of gathering. Expedition is more of a feeling of like you're always moving and there's never a home base. You know what I mean? Like you're just on this journey, which doesn't have the same grounding feel of like something that's a location or a physical place or space. So these are just things that are these are just things that go through my mind when I think about names. And at the end of the day, names, I don't know how much they actually matter. But when you find a good one that you really just, it resonates with you, like there's a satisfaction with it that feels good. And like, that's kind of what I'm looking for. And so still searching. It could still be campsite. I don't know. But like, that's kind of what I'm want to pitch again, and see if I can bring people along on it. But maybe there's something else better. And I'm going to keep thinking about it this weekend.
People can tweet away. Tweet Jason Fried and Nate Cotney. ideas for Basecamp. You've heard the discussion. What do you guys have for ideas?
Yeah, if you wouldn't call them projects, what would you call them based on your own usage? So anyway, we're out of time.
Cool. Good talking with you, man.
Fun.
We will do another one tomorrow. And
yeah.
See you guys later.
If we want to keep doing them after tomorrow, we'll talk.
Oh, yeah. I want to keep doing it.
All right. Cool. Me too. See ya.
Later.